All right, everybody, shalom, and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show. We are broadcasting live right now. I am in Hebron, and I'm joined by Rav Mike Foyer. Shalom, Rav Mike. How are you?
Shalom Yishai, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, and I'm really glad you're joining me today. It hasn't been an easy week. This week already went to a funeral of a murdered lady, a kindergarten teacher from in the town that I live in, Gush Etzion, and also a resident of South Hebron Hills. Her name was Batsheva, and she was in a lift. She got picked up by a friend who happens to be a buddy of mine, who lives in Beit Chagai, and their car was shot up by jihadist terrorists who have recently been caught also. But we went to her funeral. I went to her. I didn't go to the funeral. I went to the flag standing at attention as the ambulance carrying her body to her final resting place.
The honor guard.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's I don't know. I don't know, Rav Mike. I know that you have another hat. One hat you have is your history shows, but the other hat that you have is also spiritual counseling. Like for those of us who feel the pain, and I also dealt with folks in the diaspora, and I found that some just really didn't want to so much. They said the right things, the conciliatory things, but it's almost like you want to look away after a while. So I just wanted to ask you, like, first, like, let's just, what would you counsel somebody coming to you for, how to deal with this kind of trauma? Included in that is not that there's just bad guys who want to kill. There's also a government who cannot manifestly defeat the bad guys. And then there's also the Twitter sphere and the social media sphere where when Malka and I write things like there was a horrific murder, there is hundreds of responses saying basically you deserved it since you're land thieves, etc. And the occupation narrative. So how would you counsel us to deal with this? Both the destruction of life, the weakness of the government, and the global support for jihadism against us.
Wow, that's not a small set of questions. Let's start with the most visceral first. Is that a trauma like this type of murder, whether it's personal, God forbid, for the family and friends, whether it's sort of felt like as part of the national story, or meaning for those of us here in communities, or whether like you're identifying with the diaspora where it seems a little distant, but it's still a pressing issue. The first step in dealing with it is giving space to the natural emotions that arise, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's sadness, and not trying to rationalize or justify or fit this experience too quickly into a narrative, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's part of the problem, and that may be part of the sort of almost arm's length response you feel like you get from the diaspora in particular, is that unfortunately it's a story we all know, and it becomes much more manageable when we fit it into the ongoing story, right? The continuing sacrifice, the cost of the occupation for the left, the sacrifices we make for reclaiming our land for the right, etc. And those narratives are important, but if you don't give space to the pain and to the fear and the anger and the sadness, then you risk, first of all, dishonoring those who've been lost, because fitting them too quickly into a story is, to a certain degree, denying their very special, unique humanity. But also, I think what it does is it prevents us from taking the next step relating to your other questions, which is genuinely facing the problem. Right? Because we're used to a story which has no solution. Right? It's just, like I said, from the left, it's just the price we pay for our intransigence and in the occupation. For the right, it's the cost of settling the land. Now, rightly or wrongly, neither of those actually is a productive approach to the problem of allowing a violent, oppositional, jihadist culture not just to survive, but really thrive in our land. And so that goes to the next question, is that how do we relate to a government, which I don't know if we're incapable. I don't know, because I'm not a security expert. I'm not a political expert, like yourself, but one thing is fairly clear to me is that there aren't so many interests in winning right now, right? Meaning there seems to be a lot of interest, especially over the last since Oslo, basically, in a holding pattern. Less so, obviously, in the leadership of Yudan Shomron, because there's still a sense that there's an active attempt to sort of reclaim our heartland, but even there, I think that there's a terrible blind spot, which is that what we're after is sovereignty, and you will never have sovereignty until you relate to the reality of however many Arab citizens or non-Arab residents, let's say, there are there. Meaning, you can relate to that reality in any number of ways. You can take a path of one state citizenship. You could speak about, resident alien. You could do. I'm not getting into the solution, but sovereignty means power plus responsibility. So on the left, they don't want power and they're willing to give it up in order to avoid responsibility. On the right, there's too much of an urge to power without taking responsibility, and that ties our hands. You take something like Hawara, where this murder, like 2 murders ago, I hate to say such a thing, but like within the space of a week, like you pointed out. Why is Hawara Junction actually still functioning outside of the realm of Israeli sovereignty right now, with the number of murders that have happened there? And I can say, why is Hawara Junction still standing and be burnt to the ground in that sort of revenge desire, which I do understand. But that revenge desire is also an avoidance of sovereignty. It's destroy instead of rule. Right? But the vision of Hawara needs to be a place where everybody, Jews, citizens, soldiers, civilians, Arabs, can do their shopping and get your car washed in peace. Again, if that's a real aspiration, then we need to speak about tactics, but I question whether it's an aspiration. And that's the last piece I'll offer, is without clear vision, and a vision that can be crystallized in specific actionable goals, we will keep repeating the stories that we already know. This is, I can tell you from my counseling, this is what people do. If you don't have a clear vision and goals that are oriented toward realizing that vision, you will repeat the stories that you are already living over and over again as much as you think you want to change. That's my short answer.
Yeah, it's not, but it's hard to transition between a place of lack of vision and to come to a place of a vision, especially dealing with very hard things. And the other side has a very clear vision, and they articulate it very strongly that we are foreigners, that we are occupiers, that Israel's not meant to be here, that the whole thing's a colonialist enterprise. And then you have even good Jews, good pro-Israel Jews like Daniel Gordis and what's his name, Klein Levy, and Mati Friedman, and these guys are on a bandwagon right now to try to boycott this particular government, right? And these guys come off as they are big Zionists, and yet they basically are calling for something that's not so different from the other boycotters. It's just that they want to limit it in scope a little bit more. And my argument to them is, what you don't understand is you are empowering the haters of Israel. The haters of Israel are look, even great Zionists like Daniel Gordis are saying that this government is racist, etc., and therefore the whole enterprise is racist, and the Israeli people voted for racism. So these folks that are trying to limit their attack onto this government, they don't see that they're actually causing tremendous damage to the very name of Israel and empowering the very anti-Semites that they seek to stave off.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say they don't see it. I think that in particular, Daniel Gordis and Yossi Klein Levy are 2 very intelligent, very discerning people. And maybe it's true they don't see it, or maybe that what we're looking at, as we're seeing in the streets with the protest movement, is an identity battle. And the reality is that this is a battle for people really feel for the soul of the state of Israel, for the soul of the Jewish people, and they're willing to sacrifice, and foolishly, many things which they hold to be dear. And because I agree with you, there's no distinction being drawn outside of our internal Jewish discourse, which is a classic Jewish problem. We're a people of nuance. we're splitters, not lumpers, meaning we divide. It's because we care about the truth. Let's remember, there's obviously as we say, a tikkun and a kilkul. There's a rectified and a corrupt version of this. But because we're people who cares so much about the truth, and the specificity matters, that's why we split hairs over almost everything, right? But the problem is that's completely lost outside of internal Jewish dialogue. And it does us damage, even though it's, in the end of the day, it's true to who we are. So there's a challenge there in how to manage that dynamic.
Racist splitters, not lumpers. That's a really fun one.
That's a term from taxonomy. If you're not familiar, there are splitters and there are lumpers.
I did not know that.
Yeah, when you're trying to put in things into like a genus or species, at a certain point it gets fuzzy. So people lean towards splitting and towards lumping. Is a platypus really a monotreme, or is it just a mammal with some species issues?
It's here it is. I put it up on the screen. Jews are splitters, not lumpers. Okay, how's that? Okay, I like that. I like that. I like that. But speaking of lumping, here's the front cover of yesterday's Yisrael Hayom.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And it's got like 35 people who've been murdered from the beginning of the secular year, and that's painful stuff.
Yeah, and for me, as a number of people have noted in the media, it really brings to mind how bad things were when I made Aliyah in 2001. It was in the midst of the Oslo War, so-called Second Intifada, and that was the last time we reached this number. But there, at least, we knew we were at war. And this, by the way, is part of the answer to your question that I didn't get to, which is that we need to accept the reality that we're at war. We've built suburbia on a battlefield, and we're now complaining when mortars land in our playgrounds. Now, again, I'm not justifying the mortars. You follow? But part of the problem lies with us. Is you cannot build suburbia in a battlefield and then wonder why people are attacking your children. You need to fight like it's war. I mean, and by the way, ki tetzei lemilchama oivicha, right? Like, it's actually not the ki tetzei of our parsha this week. It's ki tetzei that comes in last week. But you know what Rashi says when you go out to battle against your enemies? Rashi says, well, that's redundant. You don't go out to battle against your friends. You know what Rashi brings the Midrash? What's it say? Why does it say against your enemies?
You got to know to recognize your enemies.
Well, not just that. You have to remember that they are your enemies, and they will treat you cruelly. They are not your brothers. So when you go out to war, you need to fight to win. And this is our problem, is that for many reasons, lack of vision, fear of the grandeur of what victory might mean, fear of the challenge of what it means to be a Jew, for goodness sake, these things are preventing us from fighting for victory. And that's immoral, I think, on all fronts. And nobody suffers for that more. I hate to put it because I'm not into relative suffering, but nobody suffers for that more than the Arabs. Our inability to fight toward victory, they actually suffer primarily. And which is odd, because you start talking about victory, everyone thinks you're a right-wing nut that wants to kill Arabs. That's just not my point at all. No, I want to bring actually a higher order and a better life for everyone involved. But in order to have true sovereignty, then we need to think about what victory looks like and then pursue it.
So let's talk a little bit about Jewish style victory. And one of the things that our Torah talks about in this week's Torah portion, there's a few different discussions about war already leading from last week's Torah portion. First, we learned that you're not supposed to cut down a fruit tree when you're besieging a city, and that you have to make a distinction between, the fruit tree is not like a man that you have to kind of kill, and you have to respect the fact that there's this thing past the war that you have right now. There's the fruit tree that's going to give fruit past the conflict that you have right now. So be careful about that. Similarly, in this week's Torah portion, it tells us that you're not supposed to take the mother bird along with the eggs when you're trying to take the eggs or the chicks of a bird. And my mother explained to me, that I liked her explanation so much, is that it's for the sake of continue. What do we call it? Renewable energy, sustainable
resource. Yeah,
right. Sustainable resource. That's right. So it's like the mother has a chance to continue to be procreative in this world. Okay, take the eggs, but don't don't wipe out a whole system of creativity in this world. So I think those two are very similar. Don't cut down the fruit tree. Don't take the mother bird together. And yet there's another thing, which is you're going out to war. War is a sweaty, smelly, dirty thing. A army camp is just that. Even the most orderly has an element of, there's not a feminine touch in it, and it is a, it's a thing. It's a machine of violence. It's really an organized violence, and yet the Torah tells us when you camp against your enemies, you shall be aware of everything evil in your camp. Meaning to say, keep your camp clean. For example, if there is amongst you a man who is unclean because of an nocturnal emission, he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come within the camp. And then he shall, and it shall be towards evening, he shall bathe in water. And when the sun sets, he may come into the camp. It's like, wait a minute, he touched an unclean thing or a body? Like, big deal. Like, that's exactly what you guys are there to do. No, you got to be careful with that. So don't touch a dead body. And here's one that may surprise people. A relative of a dead body, a related concept, is our going to the bathroom, in the sense that these are unclean things, and they're the opposite of life, in the sense that it's the excrement of life. It's the end of it, ostensibly. And the Torah tells us, it keeps going. It says, and you shall have a designated place outside the camp that you could go out to the bathroom there, or use as a privy, the translation says, but basically use it as a toilet. And you shall keep a stake, meaning to say a little digging tool. Trowel, in addition to your weapons. So you have your weapons, you have your M16, but you got to have a trowel. And it shall be
with an M16 is a waste of effort.
A what? Yeah, digging with an M16, not good. That's right. When you sit down outside, this is the Torah gets quite specific. To relieve yourself, you shall dig with it, and then you shall cover up your excrement. Okay, so it's like such a, it's like this is so didactic. And yet when I was in the army, I always made sure to have with me a trowel, to give people a trowel, and then I would tell them, it's a mitzvah. And then the Torah does not spare words, and it says, for the Lord your God goes along in the midst of your camp, Ki Hashem Elokecha mitalech b'kerev machanecha, to rescue you and to deliver your enemies before you. Therefore, your camp shall be holy. Right? Very famous. Vaya machanecha kadosh. So that he should not see anything unseemly amongst you, and he would turn away from you, and therefore not battle alongside you. And so the Torah tells us, like, if you're going to make war, make it a holy war. Invoke me. Bring me into your camp. Make sure that your camp is clean. And also doesn't have, licentious things and posters and things that are not fitting. And so it's important to actually keep your camp holy if you're going to go into this kind of battle.
Well, what's interesting is I knew what you meant when you used that phrase, keep it a holy war, but it's actually a very important distinction between the way the Torah approaches war and the way certain other traditions have sanctified war, is that war isn't holy. Your camp has to be holy.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, as you point out, war is not holy. It's a dirty, bloody, messy business, even when it's a mitzvah. Right? There is milchamet mitzvah, right? A commanded war, whether it's defense of the people, whether it's the conquest of the land. But war itself is not where the holiness resides. And it's very clear. Haya machanecha kodesh. Right? Let your camp be holy. Meaning what? You need to keep the bestiality, which is an important tool of war. Because if you're all up in your higher consciousness during war, you're quite vulnerable to all the frailties and complexities that war invites. So you need to center into a deeper fight or flight element of the human being. But that belongs on the battlefield, not in the camp. Because if you bring that beast home, then that's what you become. Mm-hmm. And that's, I believe, why the Torah is so specific that the two examples, someone who has a nocturnal mission and someone who needs to defecate, right? These are two very natural things. But
there's actually, and there's a third one, right? There's the nocturnal emission
and the dead body,
right?
And what the Torah is saying is that listen, life is life. We don't kid ourselves. The Torah is very earthy in that sense. It knows very well human experience. But when you build the communal structures within which holiness or the opposite, God forbid, could reside, that's where the demand is at its highest. Right? I mean, war may not, we don't have holy war. We have a holy camp, and we go to war because it's a commandment.
Okay, that was a good distinction. By the way, when you do speak to folks in the Muslim tradition, and you mention jihadism, which I use oftentimes as a way to describe to distinguish between Arabs or Muslims and the people we're at war with. But in any case, they often say to me that the word jihad means an internal struggle. I always say to them, hey, I understand that's not a hard concept for me to understand. But the only reason I'm mentioning that is because in this very same Torah portion, there's a very interesting phrase, which I think that the Gentile world and the world in general, the globe, we should all take this phrase seriously.
Which is?
And that is, observe and do what is emitted from your lips. Motzas fatecha tishmo. Like, watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. And then it continues. And as you have pledged or sworn to the Lord, your God, as a donation, keep, which you have spoken with your mouth. You said you made a promise to God. He keeps that. He checks that. It's important to him. Your mouth is a creative thing. It means something to say something. Say the wrong phrase, it can destroy relationships. Say the right phrase, it can build relationships. Talk to God. God's hearing what's coming out of your mouth. And I only mean to say that if there's another way that you could see this parsha is that there's a lot of stuff about words. There's a lot about stuff about how words are used, and the very kind of important phrase, which I think all children should be taught as well. Motzas fatecha tishmo. Like, watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. I'm always telling my kids, like, rehearse for a second what you're about to say, hear it, and then judge if it's a good thing. Only then let it out of the gate. Don't fire off exactly what comes to you.
You know, the three gates of the tongue.
Go ahead, tell me about that. You got that way.
Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Very good.
I mean, the first one should almost never pass your lips.
Right.
But even something's true, it's always very important to ask, why am I about to say this? Because the reality is it might be a true statement, but my motivations might not be so pure or good. And then the third piece is kind. It says it might be true. You might even feel it's necessary. But the reality is that kindness is its own value. And that, not that it's an ultimate value, but it is a crucial one. Those are the three gates of the tongue. And if one asks that question, literally asks those questions themselves before they say something, you will find a fundamental shift in your communication.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to totally use that with my kids. So we're saying, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Is it kind?
Very good.
In order of priority.
Speaking of kindness, I want to say hi to Marilyn Poe, who says shalom from North Carolina.
Favorite state in the Union.
That's right. And then we got Edwin, who says shalom from the Philippines.
Never been there, but it sounds nice.
Yeah. And then shalom from NYC. Nice to see you both, says Penny. All right. And then Steven says shalom from Boston. And then Scott says, oh, the power of the tongue. Too many mouths in the world, not enough ears.
Oh, well said.
Okay. So there you go. So shalom to everybody. And so fun to be able to broadcast to you. I'm in beautiful Hebron right now. This Torah portion has a lot of laws. This is the most chock-filled. This is what's called Ne'um HaMitzvot, the commandment speech in the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Dvarim. It's Moses' long speech.
That's a big chunk. It's 74 commandments out of the total 613. That's quite an accomplishment. One parsha.
It is, and they are, according to all the sages, all opinions hold that you could even, since it's a well-ordered speech, you could even learn from placements of different laws next to one another.
Yeah.
And there's just so many interesting things, but let's talk about the last part of the Torah portion, and that is about remembering what Amalek did to you on the way. The verse says, verse, what chapter is this? It's chapter 25, verse 17. You shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way and cut off all the stragglers at your rear, meaning to say he attacked the weak ones in the back when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God, or maybe you did not fear God.
Right, it's a big question. Who is not
It's a big
fearing
question.
God there?
So, but there was let's put it this way, there was a lack
There's
of
a lack
fear
of
of God.
fear.
Yeah, one way or the other. I mean, the simple reading is you did not fear God enough, but our sages say that he did not fear God, and that's, I mean, his lack of fear of God, that's obvious. Therefore it shall be when the Lord your God grants you respite from your enemies around you in the land. So it happens in the land of Israel, which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance to possess, that you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget. So, I mean, let's just talk about that for a second. What is this like glaring dichotomy, right?
But remembering not to forget.
Right, remembering not to forget. And then we have this whole mitzvah commandment to read this section. We read it close to Purim. It's all about, like, don't forget what this guy did to you, and you better work towards forgetting it. So just forget about it.
Well, I mean, let's look carefully at what it says. It says, and first of all, it's critical to notice that right, when God has given you rest from all your enemies around, ba'aretz, in the land, then this kicks in. So why do I say that? It also connects to your original question, which is that the formula of how we're meant to wipe out the memory of Amalek, and we remember to wipe it out, is a formula for how we're meant to process traumatic personal historical experience and use it as a source for positive identity. And that can only happen to its fullness when we've come to rest, when we're no longer feeling pursued by that which we fear, but we've actually conquered it and put it to rest, and then the trauma can begin to heal, which is why, right, in the land. And I think that that's a big piece of what we're dealing with in your opening question, is that I don't blame our government, I don't blame our society, I don't blame diaspora Jews, I don't blame Israeli Jews for struggling with how to incorporate this new phase of the constant terror, fear, pursuit. The world can call us colonialists and talk about Jewish power all they want, but where we're sitting today is a continuity with our struggle to survive that's been going on for more than 2,000 years.
Right.
So, but in this, it gives us hope. Why? Because zecher, to remember, is literally to remember. It's to take the pieces of the past and to put them back together in the present, because that's where the act actually occurs, in a way in which frees us from the trauma and paves the way for the future that we want. Right? If we're constantly running from Amalek, we think they're always behind us. People act in a very specific way in the present, and in many ways that shapes their future. Whether it's victimhood, whether it's a fearful sense of pursued paranoia. Whereas if we can reattach, we say, no, we've wiped out that Amalek thing. They're not pursuing us anymore. There's a level of freedom that we gain for the action that lies before us,
right,
which is liberating on levels that we have not yet really begun to conceive, much less achieve.
I guess what's frustrating is that we've come so far, and yet we still have so much more to go, and that's what's frustrating. It's like you have a Jewish state. Not only that, I actually think that we're stronger than ever before economically, and also vis-a-vis our enemies who are weaker than before. When I was a kid, Syria, Egypt, these were serious things.
They were major states, powerful states.
Right, with the backer of a major superpower, the Soviet Union. I mean,
all that has changed.
Right. There is no, Soviet Union that's arming putting SAMs into the Sinai and all that, and we're really the powerful force around here, and yet we have such a we've allowed these no-go zones and this jihadism to flourish in our land, and this contra narrative. And
that's the piece that you've taught, and you're trying to teach people more and more, is that this shift toward the narrative war came together with the shift away from any sense that classic military power would defeat us.
Right.
And that's why the problems that we face today are problems of perception. They're problems of motivation and vision, because these are narrative issues. It's not an accident that change happened. But yes, listen, I ever give you my canoe metaphor for Jewish history?
Like the difference between a Jew and a canoe? Is that the one?
No, I hope you're not talking about the Monty Python joke. We can talk about that off the air if you're familiar with what I'm referring to.
I don't know about that one, but
that's American. That's about American beer in a canoe. But anyway, Mavi and Yavin. But what I'm speaking about is this: is that you've ever been in a canoe?
Sure.
It's a remarkably stable boat, right? You're in the water. It's quite fine.
Yeah.
And when you're on the dock or on the land looking at the canoe, you're in solid ground, right? So think of the canoe as exile. Like when we were out there in, I don't know, 14th century Rhineland or 15th century Tunisia or wherever, we were just out there in canoe. It was like, yeah, Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring us home. We know, we have faith. It's a stable situation, even though we're adrift, so to speak. And obviously when we're in our land, we're 2 feet solidly on the ground. But you know what the real moment of danger is, if you've ever actually been in a canoe, is when you're trying to get out.
Right.
And you got 1 foot in the boat and 1 foot on the land. And now suddenly every puff of wind, every ripple on the water, every pebble on the shore is like, everything feels so, except you've made such progress. You're halfway out, right? But the danger and the fear and the instability is what we're experiencing now. And we can't lose sight of that.
That's a great metaphor. And maybe that's when Amalek attacks, right? When you're a little bit tired, when you're on the way home, and when you have a few people straggling, you're almost there.
And when you lack Yirat Shamayim, meaning the other challenge is that we've taken a stance of agency, which I'm an advocate for. We decided to get out of the boat. We didn't wait for the magical tractor beam to raid down and lift us out and set us safely ashore. We took the action. Good, bad, or otherwise, it's a done deal. We're in it, but the challenge there is that it's very hard to have a true sense of awe of the divine, that God is really the agent in creation, while nevertheless still maintaining that absolutely essential posture that we are significant actors. That's why this parsha has 74 meets the vote.
That's right.
There's no more important indicator that your actions matter.
Right. And that God gives you blessings. He brings you back home, but you still have to fight. You have to fight against the bad guys. You just got to do it. That's part of it.
Creation is a partnership. It's what it's meant to be.
I mean, we're not going to get into this now, but the longer conversation is that the enemies have also created all kinds of narratives in order to weaken you. They have actually figured out how to weaken response, how to cut you off at the pass, as it were. And they're very, they're good at that. They're good at limiting that toxic masculinity that it takes to defeat, an Amalek.
Yes.
They're good at that. All right, but Hashem has given us a guidebook and a lot of important laws that keep us both pure, keep our even our army pure, in our relationship with nature, in proper, like, for example, going to the bathroom is good, and we even say a blessing afterwards.
One of my
but
favorites.
but that does not mean that you should bow down to your poop or poop in front of an idol. That you should not do, and that's an imbalance between those things. And so thank God for the Torah. Rav Mike Foyer, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I think people can join you at your other websites, jewishstory.co
and
ravmike.com. There you go.
And stay tuned for the Jewish Heroism Project coming up.
Very good.
Start pumping out new content after the Chagim, please, God.
Very, very excited. God bless you, folks, wherever you are. Stay tuned, stay connected. We'll be right back with more on the Yishai Fleischer Show. Thanks, Rav Mike.